வணக்கம் நேர்களே. சுற்றுச்சூழலை பாதிக்காத வகையில் ஸ்மார்ட் சிட்டி உருவாக்குவது எப்படி? தூய குடிநீர் வசதி வழங்குவது எப்படி? குறைந்த செலவில் அதிக பயனுள்ள தொழில்நுட்பத்தை பயன்படுத்துவது எப்படி என்ற உங்கள் சந்தேகங்களுக்கெல்லாம் பதிலளிக்க நெதர்லாந்தைச் சேர்ந்த லிப்சாட் மற்றும் அவரது இந்திய நிறுவனமான பயோஸ்பெரா டேக்விங் செயல் இயக்குனர் கிஷோர் மேனன் ஆகியோர் நமது அரங்கத்திற்கு வருகை புரிந்துள்ளார்கள். அவர்களது பேட்டியினை தற்போது காணலாம்.
Welcome 20 Minute TV viewers. We have a very distinguished guest today from Netherlands, Mr. Daniel Lipchits. He is the president of the Biosphere Foundation, which is doing wonderful service, wonderful work throughout the world. Now I request Mr. Lipchits Daniel to speak a few words about the state of the art company.
Okay, thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you very much for having me in your program. I'll talk a little bit about the Biosphere Foundation. The Biosphere Foundation was founded in 2012 by a number of international partners working in the field of technological, social and economic development, specifically in the fields of what we call bio-based, circular and creative economy. But we were not doing this in good old Europe. We were doing it in countries like Brazil, Morocco, and also some countries in Southeast Asia. But we found that there was a big demand for implementation platforms that were specifically and tailor-made and cultural specific to those countries. We saw a trend wherein many European and North American companies, but also governments, tried to bring their methodologies, their approaches, their technologies one-on-one to those countries, and then be very surprised that things don't work. So there was a demand and a need on both ends of this game for a platform to, let's say, translate and adapt technologies and methodologies, but also, and I think this is more important, to first of all understand deeply what are the needs in those target countries. Because we Europeans sometimes tend to think that we know it all, but you have to go to these countries and be there, spend time, listen to the people, see what's going on before you decide which type of knowledge or which type of methodology or which type of technology is required to help and meet the demands on the ground. And then there is another aspect, because again, we Europeans tend to think we know it all. But we saw over the years that there's much to learn in countries like Brazil, in countries like India, that is of use to us in Europe today as well. So that in a nutshell is how I would describe the work and the vision of the Biosphere Foundation.
Now, India has got a lot of peculiarities regarding setting up of the smart cities. A lot of questions about how you will match your technology with the needs of the requirement in India.
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed with the ambition of India with the program of 100 Indian smart cities. And I think what is important to understand is that when you come to India for the first time as a European and you walk on the streets of Delhi or the streets of Chennai, we tend to think maybe there is some other work to do first than to make the city smart. Because with smart cities we always think about high-end technologies that are based on Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, real-time monitoring and feedback, whereas we see that there is a lot of pollution, there's a lot of chaos in the streets for the European beholder. So we have developed in the last 2 years what we call an emerging field of research, technological development and business development. We call it smart ecosystem engineering. And this, I think, is maybe not so much specifically for India, but it is specific for every country that wants to implement smart city development And this is based on something that sounds maybe a bit philosophical or conceptual, but it's important and it will help us to understand better also if we talk about the technologies themselves, is the fact that we tend to differentiate between a built environment and a natural environment, the life in the cities, in the buildings, in the studio like this, whereas the natural environment, the ecosystems, they're somewhere out there. But of course, in reality, there's just one environment. And the technological platforms that we develop, as well as the methodologies and the research that we bring to bear in order to do that, is all geared towards integrating the built environment with the natural environment. And specifically in India, I think that there are both big challenges in this respect, also in connection to smart city development, but there are also quite some opportunities that are unique to India, and that is one of the reasons why we came to India.
Tell us about what are your plans for the smart cities in India?
Well, our plans are to introduce our different technologies, so our technology portfolio for what we call smart ecosystem engineering. I've been only able to be for a limited time, 10 days in India. So we visited a number of states where there are some interesting smart city developments, such as Raipur, Amravati, New Delhi itself. And we have seen that there the concept of smart ecosystem engineering was received very well. And our plans are, first of all, to set up the Indian Biosphere Foundation together with my partner Kishore Menon from Tegring. So the foundation will be called Biosphere Tegring, which actually will be headquartered here in Chennai. Furthermore, we will go into MOUs with a number of important institutions in India. I think the most important of them being the Indian Energy and Resource Institute, which is a switchboard between industry and central government in this case. And then another part of our strategy is to immediately engage with smart city development. So we received a letter of commitment from the economic board of the smart city Raipur, and basically we can start to work probably already in 2 months from now on hands-on implementation, specifically with our technology platform of integrated software and hardware called Tupix that can be a platform to do real-time monitoring and management of the city as an ecosystem, if you will.
What would be the main focus should be?
And the main focus will be to get a quick foothold in the smart city development, but to bring to bear our approach of smart ecosystem engineering, meaning that we will look at environmental regeneration and remediation. We will look at how at a much higher level of efficiency and at much lower cost we can facilitate what we call the compensation chain of compensating for environmental impacts and combine that with smart city development.
Now, talking about in India, you will have major hurdles or major problems to confront with. One is political. Second one is acceptability at a bureaucracy level. Third is, of course, the usual getting the projects through at the concept selling level.
Okay, I think when we talk about political, of course, like in every country, there always is a contrast between those progressive elements in politics that actually are promoting and gearing towards change, positive change, versus the conservative elements that want to maintain the status quo and the business as usual that normally serves the higher echelons of society. What we find though in India, and I'm not talking about the central government, not because I want to make any statements about that, simply because our strategy was not to test this directly with the central government, but first look at the level of state government. We saw that the political will is really there. And if you look at the decision makers in place, for instance, on smart city development, but also if you talk about concepts like smart mining, about bringing to bear budget and technology for environmental remediation, mitigation of degradation and pollution. These are very young, dynamic decision makers that have been in the world, that knows what goes around, and they are given the mandate to make actually the decisions and allocate commitment and budget to really do and implement projects. So I was surprised to see that, because even compared with certain European countries, that is very progressive. So when you talk about the political will, it's there. Now, I haven't explained yet very well what we mean with smart ecosystem engineering.
Yes.
So if you allow me, I will.
I was about to ask you that then
Yes,
again.
I will explain a bit better. So of course, first of all, you have to define what is an ecosystem. Well, we see an ecosystem as a closed organism, a closed system in which you have actors that depend on the value that this ecosystem generates. And the actors all use, add, destroy, and exchange value. Anything that has this configuration we call an ecosystem. So this can be a natural ecosystem, a watershed, a forest, a complex of lake bodies, a mountain range. But it also can be an artificial ecosystem. Think about manufacturing or a mining operation. Think about the ecosystem of public utilities in a city. Then, of course, you have to define what is smart. Now, when we look at natural ecosystems, there is an inherent intelligence of the ecosystem itself and of the actors that depend on the values in that ecosystem. So in a natural ecosystem, you cannot talk about positive or negative impact. There is just a set of organisms, and that goes from the cellular level to the level of organisms all the way to the ecosystem itself. And then, of course, the ecosystem itself is part of a larger set of ecosystems that together form the biosphere. Hence, by the way, the name Biosphere Foundation.
Yes.
If you look at the smartness, it is how value is distributed and redistributed throughout the ecosystem. There is no waste. Nothing goes to waste. All the organisms work together to maintain a dynamic equilibrium, if you will, that always is the optimal scenario for that ecosystem to be autonomous and self-sustainable. So there always is the highest level of efficiency at the lowest expansion of material and energy, if you will. Now, if you would translate that to economic terms, that is something that every corporate, every businessman is looking for. Highest efficiency at lowest cost. So the good news is that, even though this sounds very philosophical and conceptual, is that the natural mechanisms that bring about this dynamic equilibrium that I talked about, they can be expressed in algorithms. And with technology nowadays, like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain technology, we can mimic and replicate those algorithms and put them to and bring them to bear in creating monitoring, feedback, and control systems that we can also use in our human-created artificial ecosystems. It's a system that we call Tupix, and we already have tested this, and actually is operational already in a few countries. And this will be our first step, is to bring this integrative platform into smart city development, in this case in 2 cities here in India to begin with, Raipur and Amaravati.
See, we are thinking about 100 smart cities in the next 5 or 10 years. You will be able to manage all the 100 smart cities if you are able to get it?
Well, I think me by myself, not. But I think that, of course, it depends on a large extent on what you call a smart city. And then it depends on a large extent when will you say that the smart city is completed. But of course, a smart city never is completed. It is an ongoing process of implementing technology. But in India, and therefore in every country, this has to go along with social interventions. It has to go along with educational interventions. Social economics, social environmental aspects are very important in smart city development. I always tend to say that smart cities need smart citizens. Yes. So as much as you invest in technology, you have to invest also in the smartness of the citizens. Just like in natural ecosystems, the organisms need to be smart in order for the ecosystem itself to be smart.
Now, a lot of people will be interested in investing in this project, right? Would they be interested because the return is not going to be immediately? It's a long-term investment, it's a long-term returns. People will be able to, corporates will be ready to invest on that high level.
Yes, I dare to say that with a high degree of confidence, because what we've seen post COP21, so post the Paris Climate Accord, is that a lot of countries have pledged. Some countries have made this obligatory by law. So it's not only, let's say, the corporate sector, it's also the public sector that now has to go into the game, what we call impact investment, or in other words, that's corporate social responsibility. Now we see that there are different types of impact investors. Some impact investors, they want a quick turnover, so they want to see a quick return on investment. Now let's say that there is a factory near a river which is polluting, and this specific impact investor is looking to remediate this pollution and has its return on investment by cleaning up the river for that specific factory. So this company will invest in a distributed STP in order to mitigate the pollution of that specific factory. This will be measurable, for instance, also with our system called Topics, probably immediately after implementation. Then there are other impact investors that they don't mind to wait 10, 25, 50 years for their return on investment. And for those type of investors, it would be much more interesting to take that same amount of money and invest, for instance, in a nationwide educational program that is designed specifically and also culturally specifically for India, for elementary schools, to make the children aware of how they interface with their natural environment, of what is the impact, both positive and negative, of their actions and behaviors. Now then you can educate a whole generation to be environmentally aware. Now if you would measure the impact of that, and let's say in the first example, you could express the reduction of pollution in monetary value, which by the way with our systems we can do, and you call that value X, and you measure after 2 years, you have your value X. And then in the second use case, where the investment would go in educational programs, and you would measure after 50 years, and that we call value Y. I am sure, 100% sure, that the value Y will be much bigger than value X. Now, in our case and the way we work, it's not choosing between this approach or that approach. What we bring to bear is the whole range of different types of investment with different types of return, with different types of impact, be it social, economic, social environmental, be it environmental. You have to work with the whole palette of impact investment to really reach results that bring about lasting change.
In other words, you will bring entire money and create a smart city, and the state government need not spend the money?
Well, I don't think that the deal is so sweet that the government has not to spend any money, but because the government brings the collateral based on which the impact investors safely can invest in the smart system. We like to call it more the smart ecosystem, because we look beyond the perimeters of the municipal area. That is one thing. And then because with our platform Topics, we can actually also simulate and predict what would be the yield or return on investment for those impact investors. And because that same system is the real-time monitoring of the progress of the so-called performance-based scenarios, we can actually see the progress going in the right direction or not. And with the system we have the possibility to influence the activity on the ground, which are based on a set of agreements. And because we will implement that first, the impact investors will come directly already in the first implementation, also in the city of Raipur. So the answer is yes and no. The government, of course, will have to give us the infrastructure to do our work, and that will cost money. But therefore, there already are letters of commitment, and we even have the invitation to start a number of startup companies within their incubation system. And because that is there, then we will be able to bring the impact investors. And that is just in one city. And we can replicate this approach, of course, also in the other cities. Hopefully in all of the 100 cities.
In other words, what you are saying is government, state government becomes a collateral guarantor plus a confidence builder for you. Is that right?
That's not exactly right. The state government provides the infrastructure by which we can implement the systems that give the impact investors the guarantee that there is a monitoring of their investment. And we don't expect the actual government to invest in the technologies. We expect that to be largely financed out of external investment.
So in other words, your dependence on intellectual capital, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
That's right. Now coming back to what kind of infrastructure you are going to create?
That will be different per city. In Raipur, what's on the table is a number of smart city aspects. So, for instance, some interesting ones that are quite unique is smart mining. So that is the track and trace and designing of the whole life cycle of mining operations. As you know, that in the area around Raipur, there's very intensive mining, which competes with the aquifer waters for the cultivation of rice. So we have a system, a smart system, that can bring the optimal balance between the requirement for water between both mining and agriculture. We talk about smart manufacturing, which we believe can be very big in India. We talk about systems that give a digital infrastructure. It are smart data loggers that are outfitted with different types of sensors that are in the armatures of the street lamps. So the municipality itself can collect data according to their need. But it's also a business proposal because that data can be sold off to private sector. Think about mobile providers, think about Wi-Fi providers, think about automotive industry, just to name a few. But the portfolio actually is much larger than that, already only for the city of Raipur.
Now, coming back to my city, my state, are you making any plans to meet our people and try to do something for this smart city in Tamil Nadu?
To be honest, and I don't want to disappoint you, the answer is no. But then the good news is that the reason why we haven't yet spoken either to state government or to the municipality of Chennai is that the Biosphere Takewind Foundation will be headquartered here in Chennai.
Okay, fine.
So we believe that we don't need to hurry to talk because we will be based here.
You got a strong footage.
Exactly.
So coming to the last question, what kind of investment you will bring in India in the next few years, say 5 years?
Well, what we see, for instance, in the different commissions in the smart city development of the city of Raipur, if we look at the budget, that is in the tens of millions. Now, if you would extrapolate this to 100 smart cities, and if you would expand this to our concept of smart ecosystem engineering, you probably would talk in the range of billions of dollars. That is, of course, not money that we bring to bear, but this is what it brings step to step, because we add value to ecosystems. Other investors, other ecosystems, if you will be willing and will be enthused to also put their value in those ecosystems.
I'm glad you're setting up a shop in Chennai. Hopefully you will see some smart cities. Welcome, sir, to India.
Okay, thank
All
you
the
very
best.
much.
God bless you.
Thank you very much. So happy to be here. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Kishore, to Chennai, and then you are going to be based in Chennai now. I'm happy you are the co-director of the Biosphere Foundation. Now it's setting up a huge infrastructure in Chennai. Now, this concept is new, especially this environmental business is very new and then it is difficult to sell it to the people who are not yet aware or we are not yet ready to take it off. Now, what are your plans to sell this concept?
First of all, thank you for having us here. Um, I'm from Chennai, okay, and I'm very happy that we've been able to set up this Biosphera Takewing Foundation in Chennai. Now, as my co-director Daniel explained to you, the smart ecosystem or ecosystem engineering, SEE, let's say, smart ecosystem engineering is a concept that people will have to understand at different levels. Let's say governments, bureaucrats, industries, and the common man. So all of them will have to understand that. So we have been communicating with the governments to start with, and they have seen SEE, they've seen what the possibilities, and the response has been very, very encouraging. Now the governments, what we have planned in the next 1 or 2 months, we're planning a set of seminars, okay, for the top bureaucrats and heads of various departments, to seminar for them to understand the concept of smart ecosystem engineering. Then we'll come down to, now if you look at the people, the industries and things like that, yes, we will be you see what's happening in India is the social media is what it now drives communication really, especially to the younger masses, and that's what we'll be focusing on. Social media, we'll be using social media to communicate to them what this is in terms of concept and what are the various aspects of this.
Well, will social media help in this particular selling of the concept?
At that particular level, let's say the government, we are starting off with seminars. Now seminars one-to-one, because the governments and large corporates, we will be meeting them. It's not just meetings, but conducting seminars, and it's a little bit of education. So we'll be talking to them, explaining the whole thing, spending a lot of time with them, and so far it's been very effective and fruitful.
Are you into a push and pull strategy?
It is basically, I think, what is needed here. So we're all we're not actually in that sense trying to sell something. We are all on the same side. So they've been welcoming us because this is, this is something that is possible now. Probably not possible given the state of technology. Wouldn't have been possible a few years back.
Being a communication expert, tell me, how do you think in the next few months the awareness will be created on this? Because you need to act fast now, right, because the central government is going to, maybe the next election is just about 12 months away or 14 months away, but most importantly they will have to at least take off with some of the smart city concepts or some work on the smart city.
Yes.
Now that is, for that you need a tremendous awareness of what you are going to do, which is not, because smart city concept of what the government thinks is totally different than what you're planning, right? Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. It is more inclusive. That is, smart ecosystem engineering is more inclusive, and that's what we'll be now. Government first, we'll be focusing on the governments and large corporates, and there we are going to have one-to-one interactions, and like my with the co-director Daniel said, we haven't slept for for many days. We've been sleeping a couple of hours.
You will not sleep also for next few months because the time is very short. You have to select. Right. Now, what are your plans for communication? On one side, yes, find the educating the educating the environment, educating the bureaucrats or the ministers on one side. Then there should be a total awareness of what's going to happen. The public also at mass, public also, so that they kind of give you a support, right?
Yes, but I think we need to start at the top.
Okay.
That's where we are going to start. And yes, like I said, that your websites and online, the blogs and things, all that will help us in spreading the message.
As part of social responsibility, what are your plans for educating the young ones on the environment?
Yes, that will be a part of that. In the sense, some of the probably the CSR impact investments will be looking at education, which is long term.
What about the huge mass slum dwellers of India who need also to be taught to an extent about
Yes, very true. Because that's where the change has to happen, and without the support and the will of the government, that's what we need. And we believe that whatever we have experienced in the last few meetings with the government, and I think that is going to be a reality.
challenge?
China is going to be a reality. There is a will, very encouraging political will, and there's a lot of young blood in the system, and a lot of passion.
And then the problem, wherever you think of a small city, there's so much of local problems you will come across.
Yes,
Because
true.
any city, any smart city, or any city have average of 10 to 500 slums. There is no severages. There is no system of any hygiene. Those are the challenges you're going to face now.
Yeah, in smart cities, it then becomes a part of planning. In existing cities, it's even more difficult because we need to retrofit. We need to go back and correct it. So, a smart city is relatively easier.
Do you have any long-term plan, ad campaign or a publicity plan?
More than that, it's a communication.
Communication.
Yes, and now with the social media, internet leading the way, I think it's just made it much easier.
So it's an unpaid publicity you're going to hop on. Anyways, that's good. Nice talking to you. All the best.
Thank you.